This is Joe Rogan with Evan Hafer. He is the founder of Black Rifle Coffee. This is one of the oldest stories in the book, which is the reason why people have reactionary positions is because the liberals did not have reactionary positions. And you can hear this not just on the Joe Rogan show. I've talked many times about the time, like years ago, I was on with Whitman, Christy Todd Whitman, on Chris Hayes' weekend show, when she was talking about the reason why Republicans don't believe in climate change is because liberals were so obnoxious about it.
So snobbish about it.
They were just so like, oh, climate change exists, and it just like forced us to not believe in climate change. Here's Joe Rogan with his version of this story.
Yeah.
Like maybe that thing is like, maybe there's a little bit of a culty.
Just they're discussing how bad it is right before this, how bad it is that you can't say what you want in comedy. And now they discuss talking about how you basically need to kill communism. So,
yeah, you can't say what you want in comedy. I mean, he's got the biggest podcast that exists. And the idea that he can't say whatever he wants, even, Spotify, the company that, incidentally, they just laid off 1,500 people, Spotify. And I think Rogan's contract is probably coming up very soon. It's going to be interesting to see what they do about this. It's a real corporation, and they publish. They don't just publish, they produce Joe Rogan's show. By produce, I mean, they pay for it, and it's exclusive.
Like maybe that thing is like, maybe there's a little bit of a culty aspect to that thing. And here's a question. Do you think we're doing the same thing overseas? Are we doing the same sort of social media campaigns?
Ooh.
We must be. I asked Mike Baker, and he fucking gave me the runaround.
I think, here's my honest, everybody that starts a conversation by saying, here's my honest opinion. But my assessment in this is I think that we have forfeited portions of foreign service to the left in the context of wokeism, politically correct, like the act of maintaining your sovereignty in the context of military and then economically is not politically correct. You can't broker in that rhetoric and then implement a strategic long-term goals and objectives that are going to meet and exceed what we have to do to maintain America and ultimately America's power overseas if you believe in it. You just can't, because it's not politically correct. If you believe that all nations are created, equal and all political ideologies are equal, that's just wrong. It's not. I think communism is a dog shit ideology. I think that it should have been flushed down the international toilet a long time ago.
We just haven't done it good yet.
Yeah.
We're going to figure it out this time, Evan.
Yeah, and
You're so close-minded.
You can't dabble in it. It's so dangerous to start dabbling in these things because it's a failed ideology. You have to flush it down the toilet. It has to go away forever. And then you have to evolve past that at a certain point. But when you've co-opted our academic institutions and you've indoctrinated generations.
All right, pause it for 1 second. I mean, what's fascinating is about, he's talking about dabbling.
A lot of other companies.
These guys really dabble. Because they don't really know what they're talking about.
Well, that's the thing is, I don't know. This guy's like an Army Ranger or some shit before he started slinging coffee. He might know about Operation Condor and how many people were killed. But just for people who don't know, I think a little bit of context of when he says we lost a certain level of, or we're too politically correct or woke now to do what needs to be done to maintain our position as a world power. Let's just remind people, this is Abby Martin and Vincent Bevins, just a couple minutes from Vincent Bevins talking about the Jakarta Method with regards to what actually happened in this period that he's talking about with America canceling or throwing communism in the toilet.
This anti-communist extermination program spanned 45 years to at least 22 countries. Talk about how U.S. policy can really be seen extending through all of these countries, from Brazil to Vietnam, and why this should all be seen kind of in the same lens.
Right, yeah, so my book is really about the intentional mass murder of leftists, or people that are accused of being leftists. And as I said, I found that this happened in at least 22 cases in the Cold War, from beginning, I believe, 1954 in Guatemala is the first case that we have good evidence of, until the end of the 20th century. And I think that these must be seen as interconnected, because if you look at the particular tactics that are used, the ways that this happens across the Cold War, you see an accumulation of techniques and tricks and even rhetorical devices across the entire Cold War. So one thing will work here, and then they'll apply that tactic there. One thing will not work here, they'll apply that there. Across those 22 countries, there is a variation in the level of the involvement of the United States. You have active assistance in the case of Indonesia, where there was material assistance offered, and then eventually the United States government passed lists of people to the Indonesian military for them to be killed. In other countries, the assistance was more indirect. It was made clear behind the scenes to a particular government that we will sort of look the other way if you do what you need to do to deal with the local threat. Now,
all right. So the point being here that when they're talking about wokeism, they're saying don't assassinate people. Don't create a model which you apply where your role in the context of that model varies from case study to case, to case.
Yeah.
What you do, but the model is the same. Annihilate, like literally kill all these people.
I mean, yeah.
And like what does communism do that is worse than killing all these people? Like what is like everybody's got to wear the same uniform.
My question, or my proposed title for this is Joe Rogan smart enough to know he's endorsing death squads again? Because that's the thing. Let's say let him go a little bit more. I think it becomes even clearer.
And then you have to evolve past that at a certain point. But when you've co-opted our academic institutions and you've indoctrinated generations of the academic elite, and then they've worked their way into foreign service, and they've worked their way into the intelligence apparatus, now they're going out and they're not willing to implement at the same degree that they might have been able to in the 1960s and 70s in the context of zero-sum game. We are here to win. That's what we do. And you got to play by the rules of nature, which is things will die. And when I say that, ideologies have to die. Like they do when they're failed.
All right, just to be also clear, he's not even it's not even limiting it to the Jakarta Method.
Today is when
he's basically saying that coups, Allende and Mossadegh and bombing of Cambodia. I mean, all of these things had to be done, and things die. Things die.
It just happens. Ideologies, or maybe the people that hold those ideologies.
Exactly. You need to go out and get it done. And of course, this guy seemingly has no concept of like what the impetus for these reasons we're doing. It wasn't necessarily like an ideology as much as it was specific people's interest in terms of money more often than not. And the blowback that came from these things.
Ideologies have to die, like they do. When they're failed and they're bad for freedom, which I tend to believe in radical freedom, when they're bad for individual liberty, when they're bad for freedom,
not for workers,
they gotta fucking die.
And if you're going to have
death also bad,
you're going to need
for individual freedom lovers.
Yeah, sorry, go back on here because Joe Rogan again. Like we paper over what was needed to basically enforce the world that this guy wants to live in, and then Joe Rogan says like, actually, it's them that want to do the tyranny.
Individual liberty, when they're bad for freedom, they gotta fucking die.
And if you're going to have communism, you're going to need someone to enforce that.
It only is implemented through tyranny. That's it.
Isn't that wild?
Yes.
That no one wants to do that math. They don't want to get to the 10th problem.
Right.
They want to stop at problem number 7 and go, well, it's really important that we share wealth, and the economic, disparity is wrong, and we should all have money from the state and equal money, and we should all share, and billionaires shouldn't exist. And okay, how do you make that happen?
Right.
How do you take the money from the billionaires? Who do you give it to? Who gets to decide who gets what? Do we vote on where the money goes? What about those people that are
We should just say that he is now complaining about things like taxation and wealth distribution, and people who would maybe go on shows and say there shouldn't be billionaires existing. I don't know who that might be.
Who might that have been?
Where he heard that idea. But he is saying this in follow-up to a guy basically saying, like, we need to assassinate, we need to kill, we need to bomb, we need to blow up, we need to starve, we need to embargo, we need to do all these things to maintain freedom. And then he's saying, like,
You want to tax us, bro.
everybody thinks about, like, oh, we need to have some type of taxation scheme, but who's going to enforce that? I mean, again, I remind you that we did that in this country right after dropping the atomic bomb on people, essentially. We had the highest marginal tax rate was 90%, 90 cents.
Someone's got to enforce
of
that.
every dollar that you made over what in today's dollars would be $3 million was subject to taxation. If you want to come back to me on effective tax, because people get around 50%. We never get close to 50% effective tax rates on a federal level in this country. So let's bring that in first, if that's where your problem is. But the tax rate was 90 cents on every dollar. And the jackbooted thugs who...
You got to enforce that.
Who enforced that were all red-blooded capitalist Americans.
Right. How do you take the money from the billionaires? Who do you give it to? Who gets to decide who gets what? Do we vote on where the money goes? What about those people that are under 85 IQ? Are they voting on this too?
Right.
They're going to vote for free Twinkies for everybody. free Twinkies and Mountain Dew. Yeah. I mean, if you just had, should all the billionaires spend their money on free Twinkies and Mountain Dew, and you just left it to people who aren't billionaires to vote for them, yeah, fuck those people. Who's going to vote it in? Should we take 90% of the money from people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett? Fuck yeah,
yes.
I don't need that money. Click. There's a lot of people that'll tell you that.
Yeah.
They don't want, like, if you're starting off, you're playing a game, like the game's capitalism. If you're starting off and you're 20 years old, 21 years old, and you don't make any money, and you're out there trying to find your purpose in life, and then you see someone who's been playing this game for 50 years, and he's flying around in a fucking private jet and getting driven around in a Rolls Royce, you're like, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Fuck him. He's too far ahead of the game. But you're playing that game too. If you're working and you're getting paid for your work, you're playing a game. You might be playing a very low level of the game, but you're playing the game called capitalism. And the more work
Pause it.
you
Also,
do,
we should
more
also
money-
say there's another name for that game. It's also called survival. I mean, because you got to pay for your rent and your food and this and that. We don't have an option to play that game. Who voted for that? Some 85 IQ Twinkie loving guy voted for the capitalism. I mean, everything he's saying is just absolute garbage. It's the most thoughtless stuff one can imagine. And he's saying this in response. He doesn't even realize the guy across the table for him has just been advocating literally mass murder, if it's necessary, to maintain some notion of an amorphous, undefined radical freedom that exists outside of, like, human beings being alive. Right? Like, you can have radical freedom and also kill a ton of people.
Yeah.
It doesn't somehow inhibit radical freedom.
The elitism here too, where he's saying we're going to have people vote on this stuff. Like, the thing that people want, like, generally the American public want, is like healthcare and like affordable rent and stuff like that. They're not saying, hey, let's tax Bill Gates so I can have Twinkies and Mountain Dew.
Right.
And that's really revealing that that's where Joe's head goes. Just a little bit more.
get. The more effort you put in to figure out how to get more money, the more money you'll get if you're successful. And if you're not successful, you'll at least get lessons on how to do it wrong. And hopefully you're going to figure that out, because many people have, including that guy in the fucking Bentley, including that guy in the private jet. He's just 70 years old. And he's been playing this fucking game for 45 goddamn years hard. You know, he knows what he's doing. And
if I say fuck a lot,
like
maybe people won't notice that I'm actually just an elitist who's like trying to justify the millions of dollars I have.
It's like that guy.
The idea.
That guy.
If I say, like this.
The guy in the Bentley, he's not really, he's not like red-faced and bald, is he, Joe?
That he shouldn't have that money. Okay, what are you going to do? You going to take it from him? Who's going to take it from him? The government?
IRS.
Yeah,
Armed
IRS.
people?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Because that's the only way he's going to give it up.
It's the only way.
That's the only way you get to enforce people redistributing wealth.
Pause it. Now, what's amazing about this is we redistribute wealth every single day through taxation.
Exactly. That's not like a communism thing.
He's saying like the only way you're going to get them to give up money, and it is the case that in every single country in the world, except for what maybe like, what is it, Somalia? I don't know, and maybe any other,
the case, maybe.
A couple of failed other nations. Taxation is enforced by the government having a monopoly of power. This is like basic stuff. It's the way that it works. Even in Texas, that's how it is. Yes, the government will arrest you if you do not pay your taxes. It's a slightly oversimplification and probably doesn't happen as much as I would like. But that is the fact. But again, he's talking about like how outrageous this concept where you would have armed people come to take a billionaire's money because they're going to tax it. And he is saying this in reaction to a guy who has just said, for our interests, and as if it's divorced from taking money, right? Like it's just for the sake of freedom, we need to go.
Freedom for their resources.
And kill the people that we killed in the 60s and the 70s. We need to get involved in the Vietnams. We need to get involved in the Korea's wars. We need to get involved in the coups in Argentina. We need to get involved in the killings in Indonesia. Like we need to do this
it's
to
not politically
protect
correct.
Freedom.
Across everybody, including people that have done nothing. Like, and now you're going to get a lot of angry people, and you're going to get a lot of resentment. You know what pops out of something like that? Those ideas, far right ideologies, super far right. That's the rebound to this radical leftism. You know, Steve Bannon was talking about that. And he was talking about Trump, like the people that are afraid of Trump. They're like, he's a moderate. He's a moderate in this movement. And believe me, if you guys fuck with him more, someone else is going to come along that's going to resonate with these people that realize they're getting fucked. And it's going to be just like what's happening in Argentina, where this guy gets elected and he's like, fuck everything. Everything's got to go. Everything's got to go.
Yeah,
and
I mean, we can stop it
because
there.
people are very excited about that. There's a
Yeah, I think.
So So they're saying the people that are going to get fucked are the people who are going to get taxed. The wealthy people? Is it revolt by the wealthy people?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like what's going on in Malay. I don't think is. I think probably more of a result of the long-term effects of the type of assassination programs that we talked about from like the 70s and 80s, and also like Peronism was basically a sort of a more centrist with like some labor, but also right-wing stuff. It wasn't a far left government, and now Malay's coming in, and he's just doing what the IMF wants.
Yeah. All right. That's all I've got in me, folks. I went further than I thought I could today. I was buoyed by the insanity of watching that last Rogan clip.
6-minute Rogan clip.
Yeah.